David had always been the calm in the storm for others. A man people turned to when their worlds began to crack. As a licensed therapist with over 10 years of experience, he was well-versed in human emotion, how it moved, how it broke, how it healed. But his own emotional world was something he rarely explored. At home, things were quiet. Laura, his wife of 7 years, was still the same gentle, talented woman he'd fallen for in college. She painted now, abstracts mostly, finding solace in colors and shapes. David admired her work sometimes, but admiration had become a habit more than a feeling. Their conversations had shrunk to logistical updates: who's picking up groceries, when the housekeeper's coming, whether the dog had eaten. They weren't unhappy, exactly. They just were. One Tuesday morning, Claire walked into his office. Late 20s, sharply dressed, eyes that carried too much for her age. She had booked a session through the clinic's online system, nothing out of the ordinary. But from the moment she sat down on the couch and crossed her legs with studied casualness, David felt something shift. She introduced herself, voice soft but clear. "I've been in a relationship for 5 years. He's complicated, controlling. I think I need help leaving, or at least understanding why I can't." David nodded. This wasn't new territory, but Claire wasn't like the others. She smiled when she talked about her pain. She looked him straight in the eyes, holding his gaze longer than most patients dared. In the following weeks, Claire's sessions became the ones David looked forward to the most. She was articulate, vulnerable, sometimes even funny in her cynicism. She'd say things like, "I wonder if I'm addicted to pain," and then smirk like she already knew the answer. And he'd laugh, not the polite chuckle he gave most clients, but something real. He told himself he was just engaged professionally, that Claire was a puzzle he wanted to solve and nothing more. But he started dressing better on days she came in. He stayed late on nights she had the last appointment. Once, he even Googled her name, found her Instagram, mostly private, but her profile photo was enough to keep his thoughts busy later that night. Laura noticed. "You seem distracted lately," she said over dinner one evening, pushing vegetables around her plate. "Long day. Rough cases." "You're not talking to me," she added softly, more observation than accusation. David gave a tired smile. "There's not much to talk about." That night, he watched Laura fall asleep beside him and wondered when exactly their intimacy had turned into routine. He remembered the early years, kisses in the kitchen, painting her toes in the summer, slow Sunday mornings tangled in sheets. Now everything was functional, predictable, deadening. Claire, on the other hand, was chaos in a bottle. She began to open up more during sessions, talked about trauma, neglect, a mother who drank too much, a father who left early. She admitted to using sex as a tool, a weapon, a distraction. "Men are easy," she said once, eyes locked on his. "They want to save you." David swallowed hard. He knew this wasn't appropriate. Knew he should refer her out, set boundaries. But he didn't. He justified his inaction by telling himself she needed stability, and he was good at being stable. That's all this was. Until it wasn't. One night, Claire came to his office crying. Her boyfriend had shown up at her apartment drunk, thrown her phone against the wall, screamed at her until the neighbors called security. She didn't know where else to go. David closed the door behind her and locked it. The moment hung heavy between them. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. He should have agreed. Should have told her he couldn't do this, that this violated every ethical rule in the book. But instead, he said, "It's okay. You're safe here." She walked to him slowly, touched his face, and kissed him before he could say another word. That night changed everything. After that night, David told himself it was a mistake. That lines had been blurred in a moment of weakness, and it wouldn't happen again. He avoided Claire's calls, canceled her next session, and spent a weekend trying to feel like a husband again. He took Laura out to dinner at a French bistro she liked. He listened to her talk about her gallery project, complimented her dress, even held her hand in the Uber home. For a moment, it felt like something old was waking up between them. But Monday came, and so did Claire. She showed up at the clinic unannounced, no appointment, wearing a simple black coat that somehow looked like lingerie. Her lipstick was darker than usual. She didn't wait to be invited in. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. David stared at her, his heart racing. "This isn't the place." She raised an eyebrow. "Then where? Your house? With your wife in the next room?" He flinched. "Claire, it was a mistake." She laughed, low and bitter. "For you, maybe." He took a breath, steadying himself. "I crossed a line. I never should have let it happen. For both our sakes, this ends now." She stepped closer. "You don't get to end something you don't understand." David opened the door, hoping that would be the end of it. She walked out without another word, but her silence felt louder than anything she'd said. That night, he lay next to Laura and couldn't sleep. Claire was a danger now, one he'd created. But part of him, the part that had always longed for something messy, something unpredictable, still wanted her. And she knew it. Over the next few weeks, Claire became a shadow he couldn't shake. She left notes on his windshield, a lipstick mark on his office mug. Once, she sent a book of poetry to his clinic mailbox, Rilke with a page dog-eared and a single line underlined. Perhaps everything terrible is in its deepest being something helpless that wants help from us. David tried to focus on work, on Laura, on anything that felt normal. But Claire had cracked something open inside him, something that wouldn't shut again. Eventually, he gave in. They met at a hotel downtown. Not his idea, hers. She texted the room number and a photo of her bare shoulders against white linen. He told himself it would be the last time, that he just needed to see her once more, get closure. But there was no closure. For months, they met in secret. Hotels, parked cars, once even in a cabin 2 hours outside the city. David became two people, the calm, committed husband at home and the reckless, addicted man everywhere else. And yet, Laura never suspected. She was busy with her art, with planning her first solo exhibition. She kissed David on the cheek every morning, told him she loved him. He responded in kind, sometimes meaning it, sometimes not knowing what he meant at all. The double life exhausted him. He lost weight, slept less, snapped at patients over minor things. His colleagues noticed but said nothing. He was still Dr. Reed, still polished, still professional. But Claire noticed everything. "You don't look well," she said one morning, tracing a finger down his chest. "Is guilt catching up with you?" He didn't answer. He didn't have one. Then came the shift. Claire grew distant. Her texts became less frequent. She stopped initiating meetings. When they did see each other, she was distracted, even cold. David, now fully hooked, started chasing her, begging her to talk, asking if something was wrong. She brushed him off. "I've been busy. Work's chaotic." But he knew better. Something had changed. He became paranoid. Wondered if she was seeing someone else, if she'd told someone, if she was planning to ruin him. One evening, she called and asked to meet. Her voice was calm, too calm. They met at the same hotel where it began. She poured wine, sat across from him on the bed. "I have something to tell you," she said. David waited. "I used to know your wife." He blinked. "What?" "Years ago, before you two met." He stared at her. "How?" Claire smiled faintly. "College. We were close, very close." The room spun. She never mentioned she wouldn't. "We didn't end well." David's throat tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" Claire set the wineglass down. "Because this wasn't random. I knew who you were from the start. I knew you were married to her. I sought you out." He couldn't breathe. "This was never about you, David. You were just a step. A way to settle something." He stood up, trembling. "You used me." Claire's eyes didn't flinch. "And you let me." David drove home that night with shaking hands. The city lights blurred as he replayed Claire's words over and over. It had never been about him. He wasn't special. He was a weapon, used, loaded, and fired. And worst of all, He pulled the trigger willingly. Laura greeted him at the door like nothing was wrong. She asked if he wanted tea. He nodded, sat at the kitchen table in silence. She didn't notice the panic in his eyes, or maybe she did and chose not to ask. That night, he barely slept. Not because of guilt. He was far beyond guilt now. It was shame. The kind that sat deep in your bones and whispered that you've been a fool, that you destroyed something real for something hollow. In the days that followed, Claire disappeared. No texts, no calls. Her number stopped working. David even called the HR department at her company. She had resigned. Moved abroad, they said. Didn't leave much detail. David tried to carry on. He smiled at Laura, brought her flowers, overcompensated in every way he could. But something had shifted in him. He was quieter now, less confident. He flinched at certain smells, Claire's perfume in a crowd, the taste of red wine, the sound of hotel elevator chimes. He thought of confessing, thought of sitting Laura down and telling her everything. The affair, the manipulation, the revenge she never knew was happening right beside her. But he couldn't. Not because he wanted to protect her, but because he knew it wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't bring back what he'd already burned. One morning, he found himself standing outside Laura's art gallery. She was inside, arranging paintings, smiling, laughing with her assistant. So alive, so unaware. He walked away. Weeks passed. Seasons changed. David functioned like a machine. Wake, eat, work, sleep. He began declining new patients, started missing deadlines. His colleagues grew concerned. One suggested he take a leave of absence. He nodded, but never followed through. At home, Laura was patient. Too patient. She noticed his distance, his silence, but never pushed. Maybe she had her suspicions. Maybe she chose not to see. Or maybe she was just tired, too. Then one evening, it all snapped. They were having dinner. Laura was talking about a new artist she wanted to feature. David stared at his plate, barely listening. She paused mid-sentence. "You haven't looked me in the eye in weeks," she said softly. He looked up, startled. "What?" "You're somewhere else, David. Every day, every night, I feel like I'm living with a stranger." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Laura set her fork down. "Are you cheating on me?" The question hit harder than he expected. Not because it wasn't deserved, but because it came too late. The betrayal had already happened. The affair was over. The damage done. "No," he said. "Not anymore." She stared at him. A long, quiet stare. And then tears. Not dramatic, not loud, just slow, devastating drops running down her cheeks. He reached for her hand. She pulled away. "I can't do this," she whispered. The days after that were a blur. She moved out within a week, took only what she needed, left her keys on the counter, said goodbye without a single question. He never told her the full truth. Not about Claire. Not about the reason behind it all. But the silence between them said enough. Months passed. David sold the house, quit his job, moved to a small apartment near the edge of the city. He lived simply. No visitors, no dates, no therapy practice. Just long walks, old books, and too many nights staring at the ceiling. Sometimes he wondered where Claire had gone, whether she was still watching from a distance, whether she felt victorious or just as hollow as he did. One rainy afternoon, he received a letter. No return address. Inside, just a single page. Handwritten. "You ruined your life for me, but I never asked you to. We both used each other. You for thrill, me for closure. I hope we both got what we deserved." No signature. He burned the letter in the sink. The apartment stayed cold that winter. David stopped keeping track of the days. No holidays, no birthdays. Just time passing quietly. A man alone with his regrets. He no longer thought of Claire with desire, only as a storm that had passed through and left everything in ruins. And Laura, he thought of her the most. The morning she brought him coffee, the way she used to hum when painting, the way she trusted him completely. A trust he shattered, not just with lies, but with cowardice. He tried writing her a letter once, tried saying all the things he couldn't say then. But halfway through, he stopped, ripped the pages out, threw them away. There was no fixing what had already broken, no returning to the life he'd had. The choices were made, the damage permanent. In the end, he was left with silence. No wife, no lover, no redemption, just the weight of what could have been and what he chose instead.